Hello and welcome everybody. I am Terry Kay of the Jewish Grandparents Network. And tonight we are excited to announce the winner of the Jewish Grandparents Network Story Contest. You'll meet her in a moment. Her story will be performed live by the Braid. Before we move on to something quite serious and important, I do just want to tell you all that we are in webinar presentation mode. So your cameras are off and you are all on mute. We do welcome your questions in chat and we will take questions throughout. I want to start by saying that on behalf of the Jewish Grandparents Network, we want to recognize the devastating shooting in Texas, and our hearts break for the families who have suffered this unspeakable loss. And frankly, there are no words. Thank you all for being here tonight. We so appreciate that you gave your time to join us for this event. I'd like to introduce first our cherished board member, Dr. Ron Wolfson, who will introduce the performance, introduce Andrew Fromer of the Braid, and Andrew will take it from there. So a word or two about Ron. Ron is the Fingerhut Professor of Education at American Jewish University in LA. He's also the author of 17 books on Jewish life, and he's known as Zaby Ron to two delicious grandchildren, Ellie and Gabe. Ron's two most recent books are Creating A+ Human Beings and Creating Sacred Communities. I think you can see them behind him. So Ron, may I hand it over to you? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Terry. Welcome, everybody. I'm just thrilled with this evening because two of my very favorite organizations are involved in this wonderful event. The Jewish Grandparents Network is an outstanding organization bringing us Jewish grandparents together to pursue our sacred task of being grandparents, whatever you're called. Zaidi Rani is my name, to these beautiful children of ours. Such a pleasure. In fact, I did a piece for my second greatest and most wonderful organization involved tonight, the Braid, formerly known as the Jewish Women's Theater. The Braid invited me a few years ago to include a story that I wrote called Bubby's Candles about my grandmother in Omaha, Nebraska, who had a wonderful practice of lighting Shabbat candles that resonated with me throughout my life. And it was a thrill, as Ellen will find tonight, to have your story acted out by these wonderful actors and producers and directors of the Braid. So it's my pleasure to introduce the wonderful assistant artistic director of the Braid, Andrew Fromer. Andrew is a Los Angeles native. He's an editor, a producer, a director, an actor. He's even done a couple of my stories and has appeared in a variety of TV shows and feature films. It's his third year with the Braid. He's done a fantastic job organizing our performances and the Braid's Emerging Artists Fellowship. So please welcome Andrew and enjoy the evening.
Wow, thank you so much, Ron, for those beautiful words of welcome. And yeah, I just, as you were speaking, I was like, oh yeah, I played you. I was Ron Wolfson in Bubby's Candles. So thank you, Terry, for sharing that in the chat. Everyone can check it out. You can see my acting work there. So I just want to officially thank the Jewish Grandparents Network for partnering with us on this wonderful event. As Ron mentioned, I'm Andrew Fromer, Assistant Artistic Director of the Braid, and I am very happy to introduce today's winning story and to tell you a little bit more about our work at the Braid. So for those who don't know us, the Braid is a Los Angeles-based nonprofit global theater company that has pioneered a unique theatrical art form called salon theater, where 10 or so true stories are curated around a theme meant to illuminate the human condition through a Jewish lens. This unique art form sits at the intersection of storytelling and theater, with no sets, props, or costumes, just our actors with binders in hand performing inspiring Jewish stories that connect us all. Most of the stories we perform are true, and this one today is no exception. It is all part of our mission to leave no Jewish story untold. Now, people often ask our artistic director, Rhonda Spinak, who could not be here today for this event. She sends her well wishes. She's actually on her way home right now to LA from Palo Alto, where we had a show last night. So yes, we do travel. So many people often ask her, what is it that she does as artistic director? In part, she reads all stories submitted for every salon show. If additional stories are needed, she sources them from books, newspapers, online outlets. Sometimes she even interviews people and transcribes the entire interview and creates an authentic story from the words of the interviewee. Then all the accepted material is edited for the stage, and the stories are then ordered in a way that best delivers thought-provoking drama. And this is kind of what we've done here today. Terry of the Jewish Grandparents Network collected wonderful stories. I took on the task of reading all of them, selected our winner and a couple runners-up. I took the winning piece, edited it for the stage or for the Zoom performance, and directed our actor in the performance. So you're getting a little taste of the work we do in our salon theater shows. So today's winning story, Bless This House, written by Ellen Glazer, is a perfect example of one of our stories. Thank you to everyone who submitted a story. There were so many wonderful stories to choose from. And after Ellen's piece, we will meet Ellen, we'll chat about storytelling, I'll announce who the runners-up are, and as we do after every one of our shows, you can ask questions of our writer, the actor performing. You can ask questions of myself. We'll have a little chat. So without much further ado, I give you Bless This House, written by Ellen Glazer, performed by one of our artists in residence and a grandmother herself, Jeanette Horn. Please enjoy.
Last spring, I prepared to say goodbye to my home of nearly 40 years. A friend told me that I should bury a St. Joseph statue in the yard to help the house to sell. The recommendation seemed odd, coming from an observant Jew. Nonetheless, I take a look on Amazon and find that for $5, I could have St. Joseph delivered the following day. And my grandson, Wiley, is a natural partner in planting St. Joseph. Although only 3.5, Wiley has spent countless days and evenings at the house. It was here that we celebrated many Shekiono moments. Wiley's naming ceremony, his first birthday, our first Bobby and Wiley dance party. However, the memories that I hold closest to my heart, baking flat challah and flat chocolate chip challah with Wiley. Flat challah is what happens when a bubby accidentally mixes the yeast with oil so the dough doesn't rise. And flat chocolate chip challah is what happens when the dough doesn't rise, even when bubby thinks she's following the recipe, and Wiley decides to make it even more delicious by adding lots of chocolate chips. Both experiences taught Wiley, I hope, that wonderful surprises can happen when things don't go as planned. But for so many reasons, I want Wiley there with me when I say goodbye to the house. He is happy to take trowel in hand and dig a small hole for the statue. I ask him to say a blessing while he works. To this, Wiley responds, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech olam, asher kitshonu, Saint Joseph, please bring us a family that will love and cherish this home. As I stand there with tears streaming down my face, Wiley jumps around with glee, saying, the nice family will move into this house, but they will never, ever, ever find St. Joseph. Within minutes of it going on the market, the perfect family buys our house. A Catholic family with 3 children, and they choose to leave all the mezuzah that we had on the doors throughout the house. The new owner tells me we kept them because they're part of the home's history. And to this I reply, and there's a St. Joseph statue upside down in the front yard, planted to help you find your way here.
All righty. Let's give a round of applause for our actor Jeanette, for our writer Ellen. A wonderful story, so much warmth and joy. Thank you, Ellen, for this piece. We're going to meet Ellen in just a moment. I do want to acknowledge our runners up. Our first runner up, or the first runner up that I will mention, is a piece by Joyce Silver. The piece is European Adventures with My Grandchildren. To tell you a little bit about this piece, it was filled with unexpected surprises from a grandparent, such as the adventurous spirit that comes through when getting to their Parisian hotel at 3 a.m. I mean, there were so many wonderful details, and I felt like I traveled through Europe in such a short time with this piece, kind of like the jet setter that I am. The other runner-up was Joyce Hananel's story, Grandpa's Tea House Tales. What I appreciated in Joyce's story, and I don't know if you know, both our runners up, both named Joyce. There's a power in that name, I guess. So Grandpa's Tea House Tales, it was like a play within a play. It was like a little nod to Hamlet, because the writer Joyce, rather than telling us about how great Grandpa's story was, Joyce actually just wrote Grandpa's story into the piece. And it was absolutely wonderful. Finished with a touch of vulnerability, sharing with us this deep emotion from her past about how she felt overweight as a child, ashamed as a child, and yet Grandpa's story always made her feel better. So I really appreciated those 2 pieces. Those were our runners up. But now back to our winner, Ellen Glazer, Bless This House, a wonderful piece that you just saw from Jeanette. And at this time, we're gonna say hello to Ellen with a special guest. It looks like with Ellen. Ellen, if you can unmute, I just sent you an unmute request.
Okay.
All righty. Hello, Ellen.
Hi there. Hi.
And who might this be on your lap?
Okay. This is Wiley, who you all heard about. And Jeanette, I just want to thank you so much. You and Andrew, you did such an amazing job, and really just did so right by our story. What do you think, Wiley?
We're thinking about it, right, Wiley? Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to invite our attendees today to start writing in the chat. What do you think made this a great story? I want to start hearing some of your thoughts. You know, we do want to learn a little bit here and talk about storytelling. So as you send us in the chat, what made this story great? And I want to make sure the attendees able to chat. I just want to make sure it's on. Yes. Okay. So attendees, go ahead and put in the chat, what do you think made Ellen's story great? And Ellen, as they're doing that, can you tell us what did you appreciate? Any specifics about how it came to life, how it went from what you submitted to what we performed? Anything specific?
Well, I loved that you were so true to the story, that you really changed almost nothing. And Jeanette, when I got the email and it said that there was one actor, I didn't know what to make of it, because I pictured that there was going to be a group of, that there were going to be at least 2 people, and that somebody was going to be playing Wiley and that somebody would be playing me. And I was just taken by your style and the way that the story was so alive in the reading. And again, the editing was great, because really you left it pretty much as is. And I really appreciate that. So.
Well, thank you, Ellen. I appreciate that. Sometimes, yes, we do get a story that, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. I mean, there's so many quotes out there about over editing or doing too much to something when you already received something so great. One of the things, though, that was, I think, changed throughout, and this is the first kind of tip those of you can take away from the story is the story was written in past tense, right? Wiley did this, and the house, we sold it. And so all the verbs were in past tense. And the first thing that we always do at the Braid with Stories is we change it to present tense because it provides an immediacy for the actor. Everything is happening in that exact moment. If you keep everything in past tense, it's kind of a this is what happened kind of story, which can feel very linear. I changed it to past tense. And there was also sometimes where, there was a quote at the end from the owner, and the way it was originally written, the quote came first, and then it says, the new owner tells me. As a performance thing, it can sound a little confusing when Jeanette jumps right into the quote. So we moved the new owner tells me and then provided the quote so that the audience has a little cue to set that up. So those are just some of the edits I made. There was a few others, but like Ellen said, not too much. It was a really wonderful story from the get-go. So Ellen, I mean, what's it like seeing someone else be you? I mean, how does that feel?
I was really worried about that, but Jeanette, you're a great, you did great. Yeah. No, I didn't know what it was going to be like.
It was easy because it's a very accessible story. It's a very warm story, and it's told in this very, wonderful. It's very genuine, and as an actor, that's a gift. So you kind of don't have to do very much except read it, and that's kind of what happened. I do want to say the putting it in the present tense allows for humor too, because it allows for that moment when I go on Amazon, that line, which wouldn't be the same if it were in past tense. Do you know what I mean? So that was the joy of that too.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely.
That's for a great story.
I want to take a moment to read all the things that have come through in the chat so far, and feel free, attendees, to keep sending stuff in the chat. I know sometimes it goes to the host and the panelists, so not everyone can see it. Sharon said that the diverse connections with the other, right? The way that the piece ends with this Catholic family moving into a Jewish house, and yet they keep the mezuzot. Yeah, it's a very beautiful. Lee also said, love the unexpected twist at the end. Margaret said, embracing St. Joseph in the way my lifelong friend Ellen would. We take comfort and hope from all sources. Ellen is open to all sources of joy and hope. So I love that it's promoting openness. Absolutely. Susan, thank you for it. Said delightful. Joyce Hananel, one of our runners up. Good to see you out there, Joyce. Glad you're with us. Loved the close, loving relationship between grandma and grandson. I loved Wiley's blessing, and I appreciated the respect that both families had for each other's religion. Absolutely. And I'm going to pause right there for a moment. You can keep sending your thoughts. I do want to kind of ask this question of Ellen, of Jeanette, of any other panelists here. What makes this story uniquely about a grandparent? Could this have been written by a parent? I think it's a great question. Ellen, do you have any thought on it? What makes it uniquely about grandparents?
I need to think about that. Well, some of the things, like the part about the chocolate chip challah and everything. I mean, that for me, you could probably gather I never baked as a parent, so that's why I'm fumbling around as a grandparent. I mean, that for me is very much a grandparent activity, and also just generationally, it's my friends of my generation who are selling our homes. So turning the home over to a young family, and I think that was important. Knowing that young children were coming into the home meant a lot to me, and that was part of the process with Wiley.
I think the separation
My
you have
yeah.
as a grandparent. I'm standing here.
My
Sorry,
daughter's
I'm
queuing.
interrupting.
My daughter's
All right, here's the other generation. Hi, Molly.
I'm the mother of Wiley. And I have one little one who's going to go to bed now. But I was saying, I think the separation, of grandparent to the child enables just more a chance to really do things that are harder as a parent to really reflect on. And so you've got the making of the challah and the planting and all these joyful things that if it was me writing a story, they'd all be blended together. And I think as a grandparent, you're a little bit more separated. So you have these moments in time. So that's what I think it is, more grandparent fitting of a story.
Absolutely.
When I first heard about the contest, I thought for a moment about writing, as I remembered being a grandchild with my grandfather. And again, it was the things that I did with him, going for rides with on ponies. He would take me on these bumper cars, all kinds of things that I didn't do with my parents. So I think Molly's right that there is something about some of the things that we do as grandparents that we don't get to do with our children, or in the same way.
Yeah, beautiful. Terry, you have something? Yeah.
Before you go back to reading some more from chat, there's some cool stuff. I want to just, if I may, introduce the one person we have not yet met up at the top of the screen, at least the top of my screen. That's David Raphael. David, may I introduce you? Otherwise, we've met everybody. And David is the co-founder with Lee Hendler of the Jewish Grandparents Network, and is my very dear colleague. He's the CEO as well. Thank you.
Sure.
Since I've been introduced, I'll now say hello. First of all, thank you. That was very wonderful. I love the upside down statue. That was such a sweet nuance. It was a lovely story. And I don't know whether we have time, but if the actors and members of the Braid could maybe in 2 minutes or 3 minutes sometime give us grandparents some recommendations about how to tell great stories to our grandkids, some tips that they may have to help us be better storytellers. So just if we have time, that'd be great. So thank you guys so much.
Sure, absolutely. I will get to that in a moment. I want to finish on the thought about on the question of grandparents. I promise I'll get back to that, David. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add about what makes this story uniquely about grandparents. Just from my personal experience, my mother-in-law is living with us now, temporarily, but getting to see my 1-year-old son interact with her is so amazing. And I think there's just an inherent sweetness. Not that being a parent, being with your child isn't sweet. It's sweet, so sweet. But just there's an extra level of just adorable sweetness that comes with the relationship between grandparent and grandchild. I don't know if it's because as we get older, we kind of revert back to being needing the care or some sort of, kind of needing care as an older adult and as a baby. And that bond might be something there, but I think that there's just such a beautiful sweetness in that relationship between grandparent and grandchild.
I'm going to jump in, and there was something that Andrew and I talked about. I think that there's such a wonderful marriage between the grandparent group and the storytelling group, because I think that it's so important to tell stories. It's so important to tell our stories to each other within families, and then to share them out in the world. And how wonderful that Ellen tells this story about Wiley, because years from now, Wiley will know that story was told about him in such a loving way, and reflects him in this way that sometimes as parents we don't do. We don't reflect our children. We don't, we need to be seen. Everybody wants to be seen and heard. And for when a grandparent sees a child, they see it with a different eyes than a parent does in different ways. But it's another way of being reflected into the world. And I think that's what's so wonderful about this story, and what I would encourage grandparents to write about, the way they see their particular grandchildren, because that's a gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely. So to lead into David, your question about tips for storytelling, I first want to start with Ron's quote or message that he put in the chat. When my wife Susie received her kidney transplant, there was a small painting of Jesus on the wall of the hospital room. I went to take it down, but Susie stopped me and said, "I can use all the help I can get." How does this translate to great storytelling? For me, what really shined through in the story is relatability, right? So we've been in similar, some of us might have been in similar situations. I know that when I what won the story for me was flat challah, because I can't tell you how many times I've made flat challah. And even though you end up with this flat piece of dough that you know is not going to rise in the oven, you still bake it, right? Because you don't want it to go to waste, and you end up with this flat brick challah. And that was so relatable. And then Wiley throwing chocolate chips on there is so sweet. So David, the first tip is relatability, being able to share things with your grandchildren that they can relate to, right? And that doesn't mean that you can't tell them about things that they can't relate to, right? It's great to have things aspire to, whether it's a trip that you've been on and maybe they've never been out of the country. I mean, there's still things that they can aspire to, but great storytelling, I can't tell you how many times our audience members see a piece and then come up to us after and say, that was my story. That was me. And just that simple fact to know that something happened to someone else that's not you, and you have that connection, is huge and massive. And I think kids absolutely get that, being able to relate. Like, you know, when we try and teach our grandkids or our kids lessons, we say, well, you know how you feel this way when someone does this to you? That's why you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, because you don't like feeling that way. So don't have other people. So we work through relatability so much. So I think that's a huge tip for storytelling. I want to check in with Jeanette to see if, as far as like delivery, I don't know if you have any tips on telling stories to your grandkids.
I think that, just to piggyback on what you just said, that line, you know, that wonderful surprises happen when things don't go as planned. That's such a grandparent note, you know, that's, and what a great line that is, you know, to be able to notice that in life, that, wow, I didn't expect that to happen, but what a wonderful thing it was that it did happen. And the other thing I think was, for a performer, is the heart that's in this. You know, if you speak from the heart, if you listen with the heart, if you tell the story from the heart, that's great storytelling, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeanette. Other little tips. I mean, nothing gets a kid excited like suspense, where they don't know what's going to happen next. So don't be afraid to pause for effect. You know, hide things. I mean, and what I mean by that is saying, do you know what happened next? I'm not going to tell you. And then your kid goes crazy because they want to know what happens. So little things like that. Hopefully that helps. And then as far as actually writing the story on paper, you know, put it in the present tense. Like I said, try to avoid, and then this happened, and then this happened, and kind of making it very linear. Put us in the moment with you, and don't be shy to share emotion and vulnerability. Like I mentioned in Joyce Hananel's story, that piece of vulnerability that she put in at the end about feeling overweight as a child, and how important her grandpa's story, like that really touched me when the writer just said plain and simple, I was ashamed of something. That takes guts, you know, that takes vulnerability. So that is something that humans respond to very intensely. Yeah.
I would add that the story Bubby's Candles that you produced came out of a memoir that I wrote called The Best Boy in the United States of America, which was my attempt as a grandparent to write the stories of my grandparents and how they influenced me. So I love the fact that the Jewish Grandparents Network put on this contest to encourage us grandparents to write these kinds of stories, not just about what our grandchildren do, but I would encourage us to think about the influence our own grandparents had on us, because our children and grandchildren will enjoy hearing those stories. It's almost an empowerment move to share those stories. And then what ends up happening is you personally have these stories that get handed down as a legacy to your children, and particularly your grandchildren, as we go through life. It's a wonderful thing.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Ron. We just received another wonderful message in the chat. Before I read it, I would love to open this up for any questions. I mean, our attendees, you're welcome to ask any questions of of me and Jeanette about our work at the Braid, or you can ask Ellen any specifics about the story itself. So feel free to ask us any questions that you got. Terry, I don't know if you want to bring people in as a panelist so they can ask it verbally, or if you want to keep it in the chat, I leave that to you. Oh, I see. That's a great question. Okay. I'll get to that in a moment. I want to read Judy's comment about the relationship that we were talking earlier about between grandparents and grandkids. Parents have many things going on and don't have the time or energy to devote such total attention to the child for a good period of time. Amen to that. I can absolutely agree on that. When I am with my grandchildren, which is not often enough, I don't have anything else on my list of things to do and can give my entire attention to the child. And as a parent with involved grandparents, thank you, Judy. Thank you to all grandparents that do clear their list and give their entire attention to the child. We parents try our best, but there's just too much going on. So thank you so much for that comment, Judy. All right, Terry, how does audience reaction vary in person performance or on Zoom for the audience? Jeanette, would you like to take that one about audience reaction?
That's such a great question. And it's harder on Zoom because there's, when there's the audience is there in person, it's palpable. You can feel when you've got them and when you don't have them as well. And you can feel the interaction, which is what is so fabulous about live theater and live performing, which is what I love so much. But I do have to say that, and I've done a number of these performances now with the Braid on Zoom and in other instances. And because I've been in the room with an audience performing, I can imagine that. And in this very strange way, if the piece is something that that feels right, and I want to share it, I can feel that there's someone out there wanting to hear this, and that's kind of what drives me in performing. That I know that there are ears out there and hearts that want to be affected, and so that's what I use as a performer. And it's very funny. Sometimes in some of the performances we could see some faces on the panel on the side, and that was different. And today I didn't, but I know you're there, and that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, on Zoom, there's a trade-off. We can't feel the audience with us, but we get to reach people around the world. I will say though, there are, in every Zoom show, webinar for us on the performing side, there's like maybe 6, maybe 5, maybe 4 faces at the top. So Jeanette, during your performance, I can see Terry and Ron and David and Ellen just beaming and laughing. So you do get just enough to know that, okay, I'm not on mute. People are hearing it. And so you do get that little bit of interaction, but nothing beats the in-person, the oohs, the ahs, the laughter. I mean, that's why live theater has persisted for so long and is not going anywhere. So, but Zoom ain't so bad. I actually have a question for Ellen, and I want to remind our attendees, you can ask a question of anyone here. So feel free to put it in the chat, any questions you got. So Ellen, I'm curious, are you a professional writer? Have you written books in the past? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about your writing history?
Okay, well, and thanks for asking, because I love to write. And the story I submitted is just what I especially like to write, which are personal essays. And so what I would say is that over the years, there have been stories or essays that I've just had to write. They were in me, and they're the things that have meant the most to me. But most often, those are the things that have the smallest audience because they are so private. So this is a unique experience. So at the other end of the spectrum, I have written books. I work in the field of, as a social worker in the field of infertility, or I should say I worked, because I mostly am a grandmother nowadays. But so I've written books that many more people have read, but that means so much less to me personally. So it's the personal essay, and this story I would lump in that category, that, there's just like a calling. I have to sit down and write it. I had a different question for you, so I don't know if this
Sure.
is. I was curious as a director, Jeanette, it just seemed like you had such the material, you just were so natural with it, that I was curious what the role of I understand the role of, you're editing it, but what did you do as a director to bring this to life? Because again, it was wonderful, but seeing it, it just looks like it all came from Jeanette, as it should. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll let Jeanette answer that. I mean, Jeanette, what did I do to you?
Yeah.
Well, apart from being supportive, I read it through, and Andrew has wonderful ability to say, yeah, that works and that works, and that, and to kind of just affirm where I was with the story. But then he had some really good, just kind of simple little notes about words and phrasing. And one of the best things he said, which was very helpful, was that just as before I begin talking, that a question was said, what's your favorite story about your grandson, Wiley? Or what did Wiley do when you left the house? To imagine that someone has asked you something. This whole story is in response to that. And that was enormously helpful in going with the story. So I think that's what you did, Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. That's all I had to do, and then I was done. No, so I'm an actor as well, as you'll see in Ron's piece, and I've been doing some directing for the Braid recently, and I'm learning as well and applying things. And one very important thing is the moment before, meaning what's going on right before the first words are spoken. And you'll see in Bubby's Candles that, you'll see there's a moment before that. I leave you to judge what it is, but something happened or something spurred the story. For this piece, I mean, when Jeanette first read it, if you read the first line on the surface, last spring, I prepared to say goodbye to my home of nearly 40 years. That can feel kind of sad if you think about that on the surface, right? And when you hear it out loud, you're saying goodbye to your home of 40 years. That can be a sad thing. But I reminded Jeanette, we're about to talk about Wiley. So what if the moment before is, tell me the funniest story about your grandkid. All right. So last spring, I prepared to say goodbye to my home of nearly 40 years. Right. So now you're excited to tell it, to set us up for this Wiley story, and it completely changes the top of the piece. Right. So that's a little more elaborate on what Jeanette was saying. And, it's just very easy to, I don't want to say the word miss, but when you're reading a piece, especially one that's not memorized, and we don't memorize, you notice we're on binders, that's a very important part of our work. It allows us to have shorter rehearsal periods. And if an actor falls ill, let's say for COVID, someone can step in easily and pick up a binder. That actually just happened last week. But anyway, so if you're reading a piece, it can be very easy to kind of read through something and miss it. Just today, before we performed, the recommendation seemed odd coming from an observant Jew. When we rehearsed it last week, I missed this, but today I said, that's not it. I don't feel like it seems odd to you, Jeanette, actually have it seem odd. And that completely changed her delivery of the line. And I think, in my opinion, it came out a little funnier when she says coming from an observant Jew, so it set it up. So you look for those. I have a acting coach who talks about colors of the rainbow. And so as a director, you just pull out these different colored crayons and build an arc and find different moments of different colors. So those are a few moments for you, Ellen. And I see there's a question from Joyce, our runner up, about how would I edit for a performance? It's a little tricky because I don't remember exactly off the top of my head the exact verbatim piece. However, it always helps to read your piece out loud. When you read it out loud, you start to hear how something on the page doesn't sound the same when coming out of someone's mouth, right? And that can be just a very simple act of, reading your piece out loud and being like, that sounds weird when someone says it out loud. I'm going to change it to this. Like what, like always imagine what if you were having a conversation with a friend and you read the piece out loud, what are the words you would take away? What are the words that you would add? What's missing? What's extra? What's something you can get rid of? So that's my first recommendation. And I guess the second one is then read it for someone else and have them give you feedback. And then they tell you what sounds kind of odd, what sounds great, what would you cut out, what would you add? So getting a second set of ears on the piece, Joyce. So those are a couple tips. However, at the end of the day, it can be very hard editing your own work. I do want to mention that Ellen has a certain writing history. Ron has a certain writing history. I've written for the Braid, and I am definitely not a professional writer. Stories can come from anywhere, and we encourage you all to submit for our shows. You can even submit for shows that don't currently exist. We're always just accepting submissions. There's an option on our submission form that says that you're not submitting for any play in particular. I'm putting a website in the chat, the-braid.org/submit. You can go there, and that page is frequently updated with shows that we got. You can submit a piece. It does not have to be edited. It does not have to be perfect. Like part of our role at the Braid is editing. So you can take that off your plate if you like. And yes, Joyce, thank you for reminding us. You're the one that wrote the European Adventures with My Grandchildren, which again, I love. Good on you for stumbling around Paris at 3 a.m. I can't even, when I went to Paris, I was in bed by 11. Anyway, we are just about out of time. We're gonna close out with some announcements in a moment. I saw there was one. Joyce said, my story was dashed off. I'm a political blogger now after 7 careers, the voice of Joyce.me. All right, so go ahead and check out more of Joyce's writing. Only the facts. I'll continue to submit stories. Thank you once again for mentioning my story. Thank you for submitting it, Joyce. Really appreciate it. All righty. So I think I caught everything, right? Anybody able to confirm that I caught all the comments?
You did.
Awesome. All righty. Well, thank you all. We just have a couple announcements. I mean, is anything going on with Jewish Grandparents Network?
And thank you, Andrew, and Jeanette and Ellen for a wonderful, wonderful performance, for shaping the story into just a delightful evening. I know I'm walking away just with a huge smile on my face. The Braid is amazing. JewishGrandparentsNetwork.org. Please, everybody, check it out. There's fantastic resources for Jewish grandparenting. I want to mention that the Braid's next performance is called Uncovered, and it opens June 16th, both here in California and on Zoom. So wherever you sit, you can enjoy the performances of the Braid, and I highly recommend it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Terry, off to you.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to follow up with everybody on the call. We're going to send you the recording. We'll send you a copy of Ellen's story. We're going to post the stories on our website in the next few weeks and let you know when they're there. And we got lots coming up. You can join our mailing list if you go to our website, jewishgrandparentsnetwork.org. So, for example, on June the 14th, we've got a very, I think, important, cool event coming in which we're going to be talking about how to create a culture of tzedakah in your family, a culture of righteous giving. It's presented by the Jewish Grandparents Network and Honeycomb, who are leaders in the teen field about to do with giving and tzedakah. That is it from JGN. Andrew, anything you'd like to close out with?
Sure. I put our link to our website in the chat. It's the-braid.org. You can go there to get tickets for Uncovered. Thank you for the plug, Ron. I'm actually personally producing that show with our next Emerging Artist Fellowship. So it's a fun show put together by some younger voices emerging in today's generation, the next generation of Jewish artists. So it's going to be a great show, and 2 performances on Zoom. One of them is at 11 a.m. just for you East Coasters. So you don't have to stay up too late to watch that show. And I just have one more little treat for those who are still with us. I believe Ellen actually captured some footage from the day of the story, and I thought it would be a nice way to close out.
Wiley, they're going to show your video. Wiley, come here. They're going to show your video. Come here. They're going to
Come here, Wiley.
Yeah.
Here's Sissy. Look. He's planting.
Ray, did you bury the statue?
Yes,
Yeah, and you said the prayer.
yes, and it's covered in the ground.
And they're going to send a family that's going to love and cherish this house. Take good care of it.
Yeah, but they're not going to see the statue.
Okay.
That's the statue.
They never see it. Never, ever, ever.
Okay, let's go make your rock garden, okay?
Cute.
The star of the show, the real star of the show. All righty, everybody.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
so much, friends.
Everybody.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.